Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael Sandler, your host on Inspire Nation. If you've ever struggled with anger or wanting to club someone, let alone yourself, then do we have the Walking Through Anger show for you. Today I'll be talking with Dr. Christian Conte, anger management expert, radio and TV personality, co-host of Coaching Bad on Spike TV and The Secret Life of Kids on USA Network, resident therapist for family therapy on VH1, TED Talker extraordinaire, and the author of a brilliantly zenny book on anger management, Walking Through Anger. And that's just what I want to talk with him about today, about a new design for confronting conflict in an emotionally charged world. That, plus we'll talk about worms and toads, spiritual imagery and gargoyles, working in the hole, what on earth are Conte-isms, and what in the world is the Great Watermelon Slayer. Gotcha.
I love it.
So welcome to the show, Christian. Are you ready to shine?
I most certainly am, especially with an introduction like that, with that kind of light and compassion. I'll take it.
Woohoo!
Thank you.
All right, before we dive right into things, the world seems, particularly if you dare watching the news, and I call it negative, worthless stimulation, but if you watch that right now, the world seems crazier than ever. So what's diffusion of responsibility?
Okay, well, great. Diffusion of responsibility simply occurs when we see something that's happening and we assume someone else is going to do something about it. So if you take this anger, you take this chaos in the world and you think, look at all that chaos over there, you're then adding to chaos. So I was saying this last night on my radio show, if we were all given a paintbrush and paints and there was a giant wall and we had an opportunity and you're looking, you go, why is that guy painting all that chaos? And then you start painting chaos. Well, you're adding to the content of the universe by creating chaos as well. So it's important to make your space a place of peace.
So on that note, whenever I dive in, and right now there is a lot going down, I think it's important when I speak to people that have at least some understanding. If I actually dive into that chaos, I have to bring it back, reflect it out, and send out an equal amount of love to the chaos that I have just been experiencing or reading about.
Yes. Yes. We are a reflection. We can't give people anything that we don't have inside of us. So I would say this to young people all the time who are going through bullying and being picked on. I say, no one who is in a place of peace would ever lash out and hurt someone. It's only when people are struggling and they're in pain and they're hurting that they'll lash out to hurt you. And I think that's very empowering for young people and anyone who's struggling with people coming at them with negativity to hear. If I was in a place of peace, I'm not going to be blah, 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 yelling at people. I'm going to be offering light and love.
So, and thank you. And so to describe you, you're a 6-foot brick, 250-pound brick. You've got a bunch of tattoos on you. You're not what somebody would stereotypical and see until they see your brilliant, shining smile or your eyes. Not somebody that they say, this is a person who is a walking, talking ambassador of peace and love. But that's just what your mom trained you to be, didn't she?
She did. At an early age. So when I was writing Walking Through Anger, I was really trying to reflect. I don't feel like my life is just this linear movement. I think it's circular causality. There's so many things, so many different things led to this story. And when I was in high school, I wasn't this big, but I was getting ready to go into 9th grade. And, like any 9th grader, it's scary. And I went to school in the 80s where kids would circle up, get into fights and, let them fight. Well, my mom was an English teacher at the school, and she looked at me before I entered 9th grade. And she said, I had better never find out that you ever watched a fight. You see a fight, you step in and you do something about it. And really, when I reflected on this book, I realized that was maybe the beginning of saying, look, when you see something, you step in, you do something. So I don't run away from conflict. I'm going to step to it, but not with the, oh, I'm coming to fix it, but more with, I'm coming to bring compassion, conscious education, and I'm helping to transform it with my presence and with being a mirror to others.
Thank you. And that takes you right to the crux of some of the work that you've been doing. You choose to go into maximum security. We were talking level 5, supermax prisons. You choose to bring your light and love there. Why is that?
Well, look, nearly across the country, nearly 7 out of 10 people who leave prison end up coming back. So we're failing people who are being incarcerated. And to me, that's just not okay. I would hope that it's not okay with anyone. And sometimes people feel like, well, I'm distant. I'm not related to anyone who's incarcerated. I'm not involved with it. So it's not me. But what I would say is this: who do you think people are reoffending on? Like if they're hurting people when they get out, who are they? It's your family, my family, it's all of our families. So I believe we have an obligation to help people who have struggled learn a different path. If we don't teach them a different path, how can we possibly expect them to come out and just magically do things differently?
I feel like if we don't teach them a different path, we're not, because the student is the teacher is the student. If we don't teach them a different path, we're not learning a different path as well. Because those people who are locked up, those people, that even sounds unhuman there, and I don't mean it that way, but they're an inner reflection of ourselves and what's going on in the inside of us that we're unwilling to take a look at.
It's true. So we have shadow projections, the things that we don't want to face about ourselves, we see in other people. And honestly, one of the most powerful things that I teach people is we have a tendency to minimize the pain we cause others, but amplify the pain they cause us. And I'll give you a quick example. So you're driving down the road and you cut someone off by accident, and they get all mad and scream, and you're like, come on, man, I just made a little mistake. But if you're driving down the road and someone cuts you off, all of a sudden it's like, how dare you? And it's like a big deal. So that's just a microcosm, but that's a kind of an example of how we minimize the pain we cause, but maximize the pain others cause. I like to shine a light and say, let's just be truly responsible for our actions and what we bring to the content of the universe.
And imagine if you took that situation and that person cut you off, and instead, and this is the work, we send them love instead of the monodigital response.
Yeah, I literally teach that. I love that. I'm so grateful to meet you and be here with you, and I'm so honored to be on your show because, I mean, and just even hearing that, like that is exactly what I do. So I actually repeat to myself a phrase. I started about maybe 9 years ago, and it has radically shifted my life. What I did is this: I sit down with people who do the most horrific acts toward others, serial murderers, serial rapists, people who are doing horrible things. But people trust me because I'm super non-judgmental. I'm a safe space. So people will just tell me details I wouldn't even want to put out in the universe for other people to have to hear. Yeah. And sometimes my mind would get caught up. I'm driving home and I'm just like really bothered by these thoughts of this horrible pain that people cause. And I decided I need to fill my mind with what I want my mind filled with. So I started saying the phrase, loving kindness, over and over to myself all day long. Loving kindness, loving kindness. And literally when I'm in front of somebody, I did a television show one time on VH1, and on an opening episode, this lady's yelling at me and screaming in my face, and I'm standing there, and people asked me afterward, well, you must have been feeling this, whatever their projection was. And I said, honestly, I was sitting there in that moment saying loving kindness, loving kindness, loving. I was sending her love. I wasn't in any way, shape, form bothered. I was literally just sending her loving kindness.
Woohoo! I love it. When I'm home with my folks, and they've calmed down a lot. When I was growing up, my friends wouldn't come over to visit because they called it the crazy house because my parents were fighting all of the time. And what I learned when coming over in later years is I could be an anchor, or basically balance out that by going exactly the other direction. And that is what you're doing. Now, when I see people, whether it's on the news, whether it's a war crime, it's a political thing, it's a whatever, what I can see inside of them, and my wife Jessica, she's the producer, she says, always be careful when you say this, is I can see the sweetness inside of them. I can see the innocent child. And so I can see that I can be very displeased with the act that they've done, but not the person, and send the person, not the act, all the love in the world.
So that's it. And the challenge is if people aren't in the space in their lives where they're prepared to hear that, when you share that, they're likely to project that you're saying, well, people can do whatever they want and it's okay. And that's not what you're saying. It's not what I teach. But I noticed that people are so quick to go from one extreme to the other that it's like, well, if you're not absolutely responding the exact same way I am, then you must be condoning it. And, a huge part of what I do is validation. But validation has nothing to do with condoning what others are doing. I don't condone violence in any way. Right. I've literally never yelled at or spanked my daughter. Our daughter's 14 years old, and she listens on a dime because it's choices, consequences, consistency, and compassion. My job as a parent is to teach her. And I think this is one of the things that throws people off about me, because I'm a very assertive it's easy to define me as an alpha male. I'm an assertive person. But the alpha means I'm trying to control myself, not others. There's a big difference in that. So I'm fine to be assertive and say to people, look, I'm not saying open up the doors to someone who did something awful and just let them go. No. There's consequences, but why not teach them? Why not teach them something different so that they have a better chance to learn something new rather than sit back on our pedestal and be like, you should have done what I did. You should live the way I do. It doesn't seem effective.
I love that you say choices, consequences, consistency, and compassion. We may dive into that. I'm picturing alpha male. I saw recently like a Facebook meme of a line of wolves going along through Alaska. Up front are the weakest wolves, are the old, are the infirm. Behind that are the youngest wolves, who are the tough guys who can protect it. The alpha wolf is bringing up the rear, allowing choices and constancy and consequences to take place, but being consistent and coming from a place of compassion.
Oh, I love that. I tell the story in the prisons a lot, and when I'm working with athletes, I do work with professional athletes and all that, and elite athletes, and I say to them, look, there was in Yellowstone, they did this study where they noticed what they called the super wolf. And the super wolf, this wolf was so bad. He won every fight. He could take care of his own. Like nobody challenged him. So they just thought this wolf was amazing. They dubbed him the super wolf.
Yeah.
And what they found next was absolutely amazing. Anybody out there who has a tougher dog or whatever, they know they don't like to give their bellies up, right? No, don't give me your belly.
Yeah.
I got to act tough. Well, this super wolf not only gave his belly to his own cubs to have them feel like they were winning, but unheard of, he would allow neighboring cubs that weren't even his own to do the same thing and feel like they were winning. They realized that he embodied what's called a true alpha because he had nothing left to prove. It wasn't about dominating. It was about him taking care of himself. And when I say alpha, when I invite people, men and women, to become alphas, it's about being in control of your own life and being a leader by example.
Woohoo! All right, let's talk about yield therapy. We're gonna talk a lot about becoming this alpha in our own lives. It's interesting that you use the term yield therapy. I have a giant yield sign behind me, which is your book cover, and you're talking about people cutting others off, which is the ultimate in not yielding or getting to yield. What is yield therapy?
Yeah, so yield theory. Yield theory is this. Here's what it is. It is the it's great. It's the idea. If you think about the martial art Aikido, in Aikido, if someone pushes you, instead of pushing back, you pull. If someone pulls you, instead of resisting, you push. And you kind of use the opposite momentum. And if you think about this in terms of what yield theory is, it's this. When someone comes at you with energy, anger, rawr, instead of saying, you need to calm down, you need to stop doing what you're doing, which never works for anybody.
That sounds like a fight in the making.
Exactly. Instead, it's listening. It's validating to them. And then once they listen and validate, now they're going to be able to explore options because they're going to get out of. So really simply, a simplified view is this. Let's say maybe I shaved my head for this reason. In the middle of our brain is our emotional center. And this is the super simplified terms, but the emotional center. Front part of our brain is our thinking center. Well, when people are angry, they're in this part of their brain. And when we try to just offer logic for this part of the brain, they're not ready to receive that. And so what do we have to do? We have to help them get from this emotional center to the thinking center. And I found a way to do that. I think that it makes a lot of sense. It's very, very common sense, but at the same time, it's extraordinarily effective.
And that's what we're going to talk about today. And I love this. Meet people where they are.
So I think a lot of times, especially with intelligent people, they get the concept really quickly here, but forget to live it out here. And the concept of meeting people where they are is this. If you and I climb to the top of a mountain and we see a bunch of people at the bottom of the mountain, and we think, well, they're lost. Well, we could stand there and say, well, you should have gone the way we went. You should have done what we did, and then start yelling at them how they're going the wrong way. But the reality is they're never going to hear us because they're at the bottom of the mountain. And if we truly want to help them, we have to have the self-discipline to leave where we are, go meet them where they are, and then guide them that way. Now, here's what I mean.
Let me add, without judgment.
Well, and that is honestly what's so disarming, I think, and my strength. I always say that's my superpower. I'm not a judgmental person. Like, people are who they are. because you've lived differently than I have, why would I judge that? Like, we all are living our own way. So, and you don't have to judge someone to still implement consequences if someone's harmful to someone else. So again, people who think in extremes say, oh, you're not judging, you're not going to do anything. Not at all. Very proactive, but don't have to be judgmental. So here's what yield theory is ultimately. People, it's so easy to be skeptical of others, right? If someone says something, and especially if you don't agree with them, oh, I'm skeptical, I rip them apart. Now, when it comes to ourselves, however, it's really difficult to be skeptical. When you have a thought, when you have a belief, an idea, well, this must be right, it's my idea. Yet, honestly, I've never met someone, you tell me if you have, who says, well, I don't have anything else to learn. Like, as long as we're alive, we have more to learn. So why do we put limits on that? So what I did was this. When I was really kind of thinking about how do I teach people yield theory in the most simple way, I thought, what do I do? What do I really do? Like, I sit in a chair and talk to people, or I stand at a cell door and I talk to people. What are the actions? So I became skeptical of my own yield theory. And I said, all right, what is it I do? I do three things. I listen, I validate, and I explore options. That's it. So, Mike, I got to tell you this. One time I was speaking 500 mental health specialists in a room. I'm talking about yield theories a couple years ago. A lady walks up to me at the break, super condescending, super pejorative. She looks at me and she goes, that's your big thing? 3 things, listen, validate, explore options. I said, yeah, but if you think about it, all Bruce Lee ever did was move, block, and hit, and he did pretty well for himself. So I think we can say the words, listen, validate, explore options, but do we actually listen effectively, validate it well enough, and explore options from the present moment forward? And so it's not just knowing it, it's how do we live it?
Thank you. So, and I want to dive into each of these. There's 7 key elements here. But before we do this, it's such a profound concept you shared in the book about teaching your daughter with a box.
So I believe this is one of the most powerful lessons. In fact, I've been consulting recently. People call it the Conte box now. So that's kind of, they're like, I've worked with a firm and they said, we're going to actually get one built just to have it in here. So here's the concept. Here's what happened. When my daughter she was 5 years old, she came home from school. Someone handed her a religious pamphlet. And the pamphlet was a different set of beliefs than our own. And it said, this is the truth. So she handed me the pamphlet and she said, Daddy, this is the truth, right? Because it says this is the truth. So I took her upstairs to her playroom and I put a big box on the floor. Remember, she's only 5 years old, so little at the time. So I had her lie on her stomach on the floor. I asked her to close her eyes, put a big box there, and I put different objects around the box. So when she opened her eyes, I had her close enough so she could only see one side of the box. And I had a My Little Pony right there. So I said, what do you see? She said, My Little Pony. I said, awesome. Is it true there's a My Little Pony there? Yes. Great. Is it true there's a My Little Pony on every side of the box? She said, yes. Again, she's only 5 at the time. So I scoot her over so she could see the second side. I had a little book set up. She's like, oh, it's a book. I said, that's okay. Is it still true that there's a pony on the other side? Yes, that's truth. Okay. Now, does it make it any less true that there's a pony there just because there's a book here? No. Now, do you think there's a pony and a book on the other 2 sides? 5 years old, she said, now, Daddy, I don't know. I said, that's it. When you can learn to listen and understand this, that for the people who wrote that pamphlet and follow that path, that might very well be truth. That might be very well what they experienced, but that doesn't necessarily tell the story of the entire box. And the opening lines of the Tao Te Ching from Lao Tzu are, the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. Joseph Campbell once told a story about Heinrich Zimmer teaching how your highest God is your highest obstruction to God. So whatever your vision is of that, well, it's beyond anything you can imagine. So that's your limit. So my point was, I was teaching her about listening. I told her about that lesson, and I talk about listening in that way. So if someone disagrees, and I start with myself, if someone disagrees with my approach, I think to myself, they're seeing something that I'm not seeing.
Yes.
It's not, they were not wrong or bad. My side's not correct. They're seeing something I'm not seeing, and I would love to learn that. So when you can learn to listen as though you are really want to listen that side of the box. But here's the key. A lot of people will say, well, I've been everywhere. I've been to all sides. I've seen everything. You can't. Imagine that this box now has ongoing moving pictures on each side. They're ever changing. So if you're on this side, you can't possibly see what's happening on this side. And by the time you get there, you don't know what's here. Now, here's what this evokes in you: a humble curiosity. Now, I take ego, I set it aside, and I say, teach me your side, teach me what you're seeing. The moment I interact with someone by saying, teach me, now I'm no longer going, it's my side against your side. It's teach me. I want to look at this with you. So I break down the word conflict. Conflict is a contest.
Yeah.
Okay. But if you really look and break down the word deeper, you can see that figere is to strike, and then con with, to strike together. And we might picture two things striking together, but what if we were thinking two things striking the conflict together? And that's the way I look at conflict. It's you and me, we're striking conflict together, not the contest between the two of us.
I love it. A last note on looking at the other side of things, and then I want to dive into these things, 7 things here, is when I'm coaching or working with somebody and they're dwelling on the news, for example, coming back to that, I will always challenge them to go and read the other side. Well, I know what the other side is thinking. They're idiots. They're stupid. They're just asleep at the wheel. Maybe. Maybe not. And when you do that, you can't help. At first, you might get really upset and lean into that as well. And then you realize they are you.
I think that's so beautiful. Like, I really do believe that. To me, it's like if these fingers were like talking, and it's like, hey man, you're so different over here. And you're like, hold on a second, you're all the same. It's all the same hand.
It's all the same hand.
It's true. So we have something called asymmetric insight. You can offer this to others. Asymmetric insight is the belief that we're really deep and mysterious, but others, especially those who disagree with us, are shallow and predictable. And it sounds great, except that we all have it. So we all really believe, nope, my answers are right. If you just saw my side of the box, you would believe what I believe. But I love what you do to help people with that, because the truth is that's what yield theory is. It's about seeing the world through other people's eyes, not just walking a mile in their shoes, but thinking, if I was that person, if I had that person's cognitive function, their affective range, their ability to experience emotions, and their life experiences, I say this all the time, I believe I would have made every single decision that person made.
Well, that's key. So I have a dear friend. He did get locked up years ago for quite a while for something probably didn't do, but his past was catching up with him. But I look at his path through life, and I have no choice but to conclude that could have been me. One decision, one other way, same wiring, same cool mind that he has, that I have, that in a way we all have, but one little decision, and I could have been on that path. So who am I to judge? Who am I to say? And how can I say that's not my brother?
That's it. That's such a listen, I feel so grateful to meet you. I feel like this is it's a nice to meet a kindred spirit. I really genuinely believe that with all of me. That it is. I identify with you with that a lot. And here's what I would. Here's one of the things that I bring with the work I do. As much as you and I identify and agree with that, I'm really okay if someone comes along and says that we're way off base.
Yep.
And that we're completely wrong. And I go, you know what? Maybe I am. So teach me what you're seeing.
Yes.
I don't say, nope, this is the way. Because ultimately, I'm not going to say I have the answers. I know what I believe in this moment, but I know what I'm open to learning in the next.
And if you're not learning, to me, and again, this is, we're going to go back to exactly what you said. I'm going to say, if you're not learning, you're not living. But even that, maybe that's not true either. If we are truly and completely open to it all and not attached to it all, it changes everything.
Let me come back to Joseph Campbell. He went and saw a teacher in the East one time. And this teacher, in the tradition is, if you see a teacher in the East, you kind of go and you ask a question, which is wonderful because the teaching is saying, if you're in the stage of change where you're ready to ask a question, you're more receptive to the answer rather than talking at somebody. So he sits down and he gets his opportunity to meet with this master. And he says, why is it that we, if everything is the divine nature, then why do we renounce evil? Why do we renounce these things? Why do we rail against these things that are occurring if everything is what he called Brahma? Everything is the divine nature. And the spiritual teacher looked at him and said, for you and for me, that is the way it is. In other words, if you can see that perspective, wonderful. And if you can't, that's okay. It's where you are. But it is true. It's all a part of human nature.
It may all be Brahma or Brahman, but when the car is parked on your foot and you're going, it's all good, it's all God, there's nothing wrong with asking for the car to be driven off of your foot.
Yes, that's it. Like, that's it. You can still act, respond, be in the world, assert yourself, step in and do things. But at the same time, you recognize we're spiritual beings living a human experience.
Yeah. And that's why you've put yourself in the trenches. And that's why I do what I do. I call it the two-step methodology. The first step, we work on the inside. We work on that heart. But then we have to, it maybe is too strong, do what we can to serve or at least chop wood and carry water.
I love that idea. That resonates with me. Look, there was a gnat. He was taking a nap on these bull's horns, and he woke up from his nap. And he's like, oh, I'm so sorry, Mr. Bull. I fell asleep. I'll take off now. And the bull was like, I didn't even know you were there. And when I heard that story, I thought, I will never be that gnat on this planet. I'm not going to leave the planet and have it go, I didn't even know he was here. Like, I strive every day to try to make sure I'm leaving a legacy that is worth leaving.
Thank you. So let's dive briefly into the 7 fundamental components. And first off, let's talk about acceptance. And I want to talk about, this is something that we struggle with in our own minds, the tyranny of the should.
Yeah. Well, so I call it, and I actually reference Karen Horney, who actually coined that phrase, tyranny of the should. And the idea, I call it the cartoon world and the real world. So the cartoon world is our world of shoulds. And I make it a cartoon world because I say it's fantasy anyway. He shouldn't have said that. She shouldn't have done that. Guess what? The real world is, it did happen. So the cartoon world is filled with the world as you believe it should be, and the real world is the world as it is. And here's one of the big messages I teach people. If you align your expectations with the cartoon world, you're going to be let down. But it's not the world that's letting you down. The world is what it is. It's your own expectations. So I teach people how to align their expectations with reality. The more prepared I am for it. And that's a key to acceptance. The idea of acceptance, especially when I write a book about anger and violence and I'm in prisons, the people's projection without reading a word and throwing out, it's funny because I do a YouTube channel as well. And when I do this YouTube channel, I could post a video, and I'm wondering if you have a similar experience, but before I could post it before it's been watched 2 seconds, there are already likes and no likes. Like,
yes, it's the bizarrest thing. There's somebody who's like got some sort of autoresponder on the thumb.
Yes. And they're ready to press, but they're following just to press not like. You know what I mean? Like, how closely are you paying attention to this? But anyway, so this does happen. So acceptance, one of the things I'll hear from people is they'll say, without ever listening to a word I actually say, oh, you're just saying accept people hurting people. Not at all. Not even a little bit. Acceptance means accepting the reality of the situation. Mm-hmm. Instead of me talking about how he shouldn't have done that, I'm in the real world where he did that. And now I'm working on what we can do from this moment forward, not living in my cartoon world of, well, that never should have happened in the first. What's the matter? That's all just fluff. The reality is this is what's happening. So acceptance is about accepting where people are. It's accepting their readiness, willingness, or even ability and preparedness to make a change. And it's accepting one other aspect is this. There's the difference between what's called ego, the sense of who we think we are, and essence, who we actually are, much deeper aspect to us. And acceptance is understanding that people are, and you said it earlier, it's about you see people as their essence. And their ego just did something that was harmful and hurtful, and you're not condoning that in any way, but you're still seeing their essence, that they're more than the sum of their actions. You see, ultimately, people see our actions, not our intentions, but we judge other people on their actions, but judge ourselves on our intentions.
Would you mind sharing us real briefly the story of the great watermelon slayer?
Yes, I'm going to give it to you. I'm going to tell it the way I originally told it.
Yeah.
So it's slightly different in the book, but this is the way I kind of tell it I'm speaking. So there was a man who he stumbled into this foolish land, and these people were real naive, and they were screaming. They were up in arms. They're like, "There's a monster in the village. There's a monster in the village." So this man says, "Well, show him to me." So the people in the village, they take him to the end of town, and he looks out in this open field. He doesn't see anything. There's like a watermelon there. And they're like, "There's a monster." He's like, "Where is it?" They're like, "It's right there." He's like, "That's not a monster." And he walks over and smacks the watermelon in half, takes a bite out of it. He turns around, and the people are pale as ghosts. "Oh my gosh, he's worse than the first monster. He killed it and ate it. Let's get him." So they get their pitchforks. They drive him out of town. Well, about a year later, another stranger stumbles into the land, and by this time, another monster grew up outside the village, and so the people were up in arms. "There's a monster, there's a monster." So this stranger, he comes out and he looks and he sees it's a watermelon. He knows it's a watermelon, but he knows that they don't know it's a watermelon.
Yes.
So he looks at it like, "Oh my goodness," and he starts to walk out to it, and he runs back, and then he brings them with him, and they run back. And then he finally gets around. He touches it. They touch it. Eventually, he teaches them how to cultivate it, and he becomes known as the Great Watermelon Slayer. I feel like good music could come down to that. Dun, 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 dun. Yeah. But this is the essence of yield theory. It's not a matter of telling people, this is how it is. You can speak just to speak. You can stand on a pedestal. You can stand on your soapbox, talk at people. Yield theory is about meeting people where they actually are, not talking about what they should know, but what they do know, and then helping them shine light on it from there.
Awesome. And that brings us to number 2, which is authenticity. And I'm sure when you're in the hole with somebody, when you're in that lockdown cell, you are being real, because they will know in a nanosecond. Probably your life is even on the line sometimes if you're not being real.
So, I went into a death row unit like a month ago. I walked in the unit and I said to the officer, "Hey, open up the doors. I want to talk to the guys." He was laughing. He was like, "Oh, okay." And I said, No, seriously, open up the doors. I want to talk to the guys. They come down to these tables here. He's like, "Are you serious?" I said, "Yeah, I'm serious." So he radios up to the guy in the bubble, and he's like, "Doc wants the guys out he wants you to open the doors." And the guy kicks back in and goes, "Are you serious?" He said he's serious. So he said, "Okay, boom." So I opened the doors. Well, the first unit I went on and did that, only 4 guys came out, because if you know anything about maximum security prisons, if the doors just open and you don't know why, you might not be so quick to jump out because you don't know what's going to happen.
Yes.
So only about 4 guys came out, but I talked to them. Word travels faster sometimes in a prison than it does in places where people have cell phones, because they talk through pipes and things like that. So by the time I got to the next unit, I said, same thing. Let's open up the doors. Everybody came out. So I had 20-some death row inmates sitting out at these tables. Now, if there's nobody, I didn't have them handcuffed. I didn't have them normally coming out with, their hands and feet shackled, none of that. I said, just come out. Let's just talk. I don't have a false sense of confidence. I'm aware something could go down. Absolutely it could. But my confidence comes from I'm leading with compassion. I'm not there with ego. I'm there with essence, and I'm looking at their essence, not ego, and I'm trying to shine light on lessons. So I had this great session with these guys on death row, and there's that. So am I putting my life on the line? Yes, but I'm authentic, and they see that. You can't fake anything in prison, because that's all they do is read people all day. So the first thing they're doing is eyeing you up, boom. Any insecurities, they're coming at you, they're testing you. I want to tell you a funny story from this. Sure. I'm going to give you a story of what happened with this. This is awesome. It's all links together. I get excited about this. So I do this exercise with people. I did it with athletes. And my daughter told me recently it's her favorite thing I've ever taught her. But I was in front of a group of athletes once, and I said, if I gave you a bucket, what would you put in it? And they were like, well, what's it for? I'm like, I give you a bucket. What are you putting in it? So some kids were like cell phones. Some kids were like money. I said, all right, so whatever you have in your bucket, it's in your bucket, right? Yeah, pretty simple. All right. So I thought, I'm going to teach this lesson to death row, because I'll tell you the rest of the lesson in a minute. So I said, on death row to that group of guys, if I give you a bucket, what are you putting in it? First guy says food. I look over at this next guy. Next guy's enormous, this big guy. I said, if I give you a bucket, what are you putting in it? He looked at me, goes, my celly's head. I said, okay, because I'm not flinching. I'm like, all right, so you'd have food in your bucket, and you'd have your celly's head in your bucket. And my lesson to them is the lesson I have for your audience right now. Whatever you put in your bucket will be in your bucket, and it's the same is true with your mind. Whatever you put in your mind will be in your mind. If you fill your mind with violence, you're going to have violence in your mind. If you fill your mind with peace, you'll have peace in your mind. Now, this lesson is a very powerful lesson. And, I didn't know in that moment what was more concerning, because at first when the death row inmate told me he wanted his celly's head in a bucket, I thought, well, okay, now I understand why you're on death row. But I didn't know if that was more concerning, or the fact that on death row they're single-celled, so he didn't have a celly. The lesson is important, though, because what you put in your bucket is in your bucket. And that's a lesson that I think is something you live. You live. You're constantly filling your bucket with peaceful things.
So, and it's something that is actually very easy to give away. You talk about it in one of the later sections of the book, that if somebody, we'll go back to this cutoff example, or somebody in prison doing something more severe, it's very easy to give the bucket of our minds away to somebody else or to a situation and not even realize I've given away my mind.
All the time. We give away our power. I use the example of Iron Man. If Iron Man had his power source in his chest, so you can see it. This is his power source. But imagine if he's fighting the bad guy, he's not going to take off his power source and give it away in the final scene. In a similar way, we have a power source, but our power is not tangible. We can't see it. Remember, the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao.
Yeah.
And so, but what if it was? Now, I share this with people all the time. I say, if your power was tangible and someone was mean to you, did something wrong, why in the world would you take off your power and hand it to them? And people say, well, I wouldn't want to do it. I wouldn't want to do that. Okay. Well, guess what? This is a very true, not cartoon world, real world thought. Every time your day has been going one way and someone says or does something that throws you off, you've taken off your power and given it to them. And this is mind-boggling when we really shine light on this. We tend to give our power away to the people we don't even like. Why are we giving it to them? If we don't like them, why are we saying, here's my power. I want you to know I'm going to be thinking about you all day, all night. That's what happens with people. They live in this chaos.
We live in that chaos, both with people, both with, I don't know why I'm going back to the news so much today, but we are so quick to give away our power saying, what can I think about today that's going to pull me down, that's going to drag me down, that's going to keep me from living my greatest life? Oh, here it is over here. Let's go there. Let's jump from there. And we've kind of touched on compassion a little bit. I might actually, heck, let's go there for just 30 seconds. Tonglen.
Okay, so Tonglen is a Buddhist meditation where we inhale, we visualize inhaling the pain of others, and then that pain is naturally transformed before it really even gets to us in that divine energy, so that when we exhale, we're exhaling a healing balm or healing energy back to that person. It is a transformative meditation, super, super powerful. A lot of times when I was growing up and even being involved in meditation and things, like I would always hear, visualize breathing in only good things. So when I first encountered Tonglen, I thought, well, do I want to breathe in negativity? Well, over the last definite 8 years, I think 9 years now, I've been living this every day of my life where I constantly am breathing in that pain. And here's the key. You don't visualize like I'm taking that energy, it's in me. It's like you're tapping into your divine self. And as that energy is coming, it's being healed. So by the time it even gets to you, it's all divine energy and you're sending back that light and love.
Awesome, awesome. Let's talk about one more, and then we're going to dive into some things not to do. I'll put that in quotes, not to do, because everything is good, everything is God, but still you don't need to drive the car over somebody else's foot. Non-attachment and the importance of this.
So non-attachment is probably one of the most important aspects to actually practicing yield theory. I think a lot of people will say, well, I do that, I do this, but do you? Can you, if someone challenges you and say, that's a bunch of crap, I don't believe it, can you say, maybe it is, I don't know. I'm giving you the best I can with what I have. Yeah. I actually had a woman call my radio show recently and she said, well, what about this non-attachment stuff? What if you're wrong about that? And I said, absolutely, I might be. And she was like, but oh, yeah. I was like, yeah, it's true. Like, it's okay. It doesn't mean I don't have beliefs. It doesn't mean I'm not passionate. Like, you can listen to my voice. I'm a very passionate person. I believe strongly, but I also am open that I don't have the answers. And as long as I'm alive, I'm still seeking. So non-attachment is saying, I bet 100% of the people in talks I do all over the country, if I ask people to raise their hand and say, how many of you still have more to learn? 100% of the hands go up, right? I say, in the moment someone disagrees with you, is your first thought, teach me, I want to learn? Or is your first thought, well, I'm going to tell you how you're wrong? So all of a sudden, you don't really believe you have more to learn. And quite simply, I think the way to practice yield theory is to have the humility to really do genuinely believe you have more to learn. I'm not attached to my thoughts. I'm not attached to the work I do. Mm-hmm. If I write an article, I say, if somebody has feedback or if somebody gives me feedback with this book or whatever as I'm writing it, thanks, wonderful. But what do? We get attached to it. I want to give you a visual I think is a helpful visual. So if I take my thoughts and ideas and I put them in this, which I did, but let's say, I hold on to them tightly and you disagree with them. Yep. Well, if I'm holding on tightly to my ideas, I say, how dare you? And then I start to get my ego involved. But if I truly embrace, I really am still learning, and I take my thoughts and I set them down over here, if you disagree with my thoughts, I realize you're not disagreeing with the essence of who I am. You're just disagreeing with these thoughts. Imagine the difference in every relationship if you can share something with your loved one and say, this is my perspective, but I'm definitely open to what you're experiencing as well.
Woohoo! And then skipping ahead to creativity, and this is an exercise you've done. You've put a wise man in the passenger seat, so to speak. If you find yourself, why am I so dang angry right now? This has really got me upset. And you actually see the anger instead as a friend, because I talk about when I'm teaching people with the ego, I don't say push it away. I don't say get rid of it. I don't say destroy the ego. I say integrate the ego, bring it in. It's your best friend. Talk to the ego, ask questions of the ego, learn from the ego, and learn from your anger.
I really feel really blessed to have this conversation with you. I get energized whenever I meet people all over the world, and when you hear an essence, what I feel is a truth, and to hear that and see that reflected in someone, it's really beautiful. I agree with you. It's not about getting rid of anger. It's not about getting rid of the ego. I use the phrase sometimes setting it aside, but I also love the concept of personifying whatever's troubling you. So maybe you personify anger and you talk to anger. What are you trying to teach me here in this moment? Maybe you personify the sadness you're experiencing. And you say, what are you teaching me? This is how we become constant learners. And if you really look back, let's think about the woman who created the concept tyranny of the shoulds, Karen Horney, and in her one book, Neurosis and Human Growth, she talks about the essence being that unique, alive center of us that always wants to grow. Always wants to grow. Doesn't want to grow sometimes, always. So it's like when we personify it, we go, teach me now. Teach me something that I need to learn in this moment.
Awesome. Let's go from here, and I'm going to go to mindfulness for a second. I like to think of four of my greatest teachers, which three are literal kitty cats, and we have 3 cats, 2 of which are feral, and the other is my wife, who is like a kitty cat, and they are, as people are in prison, exceptionally sensitive to energy. I have to be this is about mindfulness, incredibly careful of the energy I bring in the room, or kitties can scatter or certainly get very, very upset. What can you tell us about being mindful, and particularly being mindful of what we bring into any situation?
Yeah, look, the reality is that we can only ever control ourselves. That's one. 2, we play a role in every communication we have. And our first instinct through ego is to say, well, I didn't do it, that's you. Or you might say to your ego could say to your wife, well, why are you so sensitive? Or you shouldn't be, all the cartoon world. But your true essence is saying, wait a minute, I'm playing a role, and obviously the energy I'm bringing is impacting you. It's so fascinating to watch human beings get so upset and say, if they hurt someone, they go, well, I didn't do it. But if someone does something else, they go, well, your energy impacted me. Well, yes, no one causes us to feel a certain way, but our energy impacts others and influences others just like their energy influences us. So mindfulness is about recognizing that you do play a role, recognizing people are seeing your actions, not your intentions, and trying to be aware of what impact your energy is having on others. So a real simple exercise is to almost step outside yourself and become what's called the observer and say, what's what's this guy feeling? Like his stomach is all twisted in a knot, or his heart's racing fast, or boy, his thoughts are spinning. And then I don't have to judge it. I come in and go, you know what? Let's do it with hunger. Let's do it with hunger.
All right.
So creativity is a huge part of my theory. I try to just think creatively. So let's say you're really hungry, and how many arguments and disagreements. I don't know how long you've been with your wife. My wife and I have been together 19 years. We've been married 21 years together. When we were young, we're getting to disagreements, arguments, because one or both of us was overly hungry. Just so nonsense.
Yes. I heard a term about a year and a half ago. It stuck. Hangry.
Hangry, yes. I actually cited research from some incredible people who are doing some research around it, because it's hunger and not being clear. So you're indecisive and hungry, then you get hangry, hunger and angry. So I would say to my wife nowadays with mindfulness, hey, honey, I could feel myself being super agitated right now. I honestly think I'm just really, really hungry. I want to eat first, and then we can talk about this. But right now, I can't even think clearly. So now I'm owning it. I'm making a simple self-disclosure. I'm hungry. I'm recognizing that when I'm hungry, I'm going to be agitated like every other human being, and that's okay. It's not wrong or bad, but I'm articulating it. That's what mindfulness can do for us.
I love it. We have a term in the house, and I admit occasionally to violating this, hopefully less now than ever. So I used to have huge blood sugar challenges, even had a service dog who would monitor my blood sugar and let me know if I was going down. But we also had a coyote, and she was with me for over 17 years.
Wow.
And she would get by my wife's side. 9 years ago, 9 years, we'll be married 9 years on Thursday. She would get by my wife's side if I was going down and put her paws down and just give me the stink eye. And what we came up with is what's called the pumpkin rule. The pumpkin rule is if the wifey says you need to eat, you need to eat.
That's awesome.
Then the rational mind will come back on board.
I love that. I love that. That's awesome.
So, love you, pumpkin. All right. Since we're talking about mindfulness and we're talking about body position and posturing, this one is huge. If parents get nothing else out of this conversation, parents of young kids, the importance of getting down to a child's level.
So it's once we hear it, it's hard to unsee it. But the reality is, I say this to parents, imagine you're standing next to a 30-foot giant who says, you know I love you. You're like, oh gosh, I don't know. Maybe he loves me, but the way he's talking, I don't know. Well, when we think of our small children, how much bigger are we than they are? And when you're talking, and when you're standing over top of them talking, it's automatic to be like, holy crap, this being could do anything to me right now. And so that is a fear-based response. If you want your children to learn, again, you have to have the self-discipline, because a lot of people don't want to do it. They just want to take the easy way out and just yell. But get down on a knee and teach. Constantly teach. So that is so important. Here's why. Let's throw out any philosophy and go straight to neuroscience. If you're standing over top of someone in a position of intimidation, doesn't matter, people see your actions, not your intention, doesn't matter what you mean to be, matters what you're showing, then what happens is you're triggering the amygdala, two little almond-shaped centered parts of the brain that send messages to your adrenal gland going, watch out, watch out. And you're not eliciting the higher level thinking, decision making. Why would we want to do that? That's like shooting yourself in your foot. Like, why would you do that? Get down on a knee. Is it going to take effort? Yes, but it's well worth it, because the effort you put in up front pays off dividends down the road. And you know, this is something else that's really powerful, I think, as a message. You might yell at your kids and think, well, see, they listen around me. They wouldn't do that around me. Great. They're not going to be around you your whole life. You're there to help them become independent. So when I talk about that bucket lesson with my daughter, I was super proud of her. Recently, she said, Daddy, I was at my friend's house and they all started to watch this commercial for an upcoming like scary movie. And she said, I wasn't watching it. She said, I didn't want that in my I didn't want that in my bucket. I didn't want that in my psyche. And I was like, I'm so proud of you. It's so amazing. And it wasn't the kids weren't doing anything wrong or bad. It was just she recognized what I put in my mind will be in my mind. And I think that's very powerful. What we want to do with our children is teach them so that they can listen, do well in life without us being right there.
And I love what you're saying, and they are watching and learning mirror neurons from you. Oh yeah, I'm going to yell at you so that you will be a better person. Uh-huh.
So that's it. So I actually wrote a book called Zen Parent, Zen Child.
Yeah.
And it's about being, if you want your children to be Zen, you've got to be Zen yourself.
Woohoo! All right, real quickly, but we're going to whip through the 5 errors of communication or what not to do. Error of approach. I'm sorry, Christian, we need to talk.
I love it. That's it. You think in the history of the world, when has the phrase, we need to talk, been followed up by, I think the world of you and I haven't found the right way to tell you you're perfect? No, it's followed up by you're in trouble. How about this one? The word why. Think about this. Why'd you do that? First time you hear the word why, you're a little kid, you're in trouble. Why'd you do that? That word becomes associated with I'm in trouble. So the 5 errors of communication I created are, I noticed that we have a tendency to shut people down.
Yeah.
And remember, yield theory is all about circumventing fight or flight response, meeting people where they are, shining light, creative conscious education. So the error of approach occurs anytime we shut people down from the moment. Let me tell you why you're wrong. There's a good example of it.
Oh, God, you're in trouble. All right. And then the error of interpretation.
So an error of interpretation occurs when we fail to accurately understand what people are communicating with us. I often teach with this concept the difference between content and process. Content are the words we say, process are how we say it. Let's go back to that 30-foot giant. You know I love you. The content is I love you. The process is scary giant coming after me. So, and angry, right? So we have to learn to be able to listen for process as well as content to be able to accurately hear someone.
Makes sense. And then an error of judgment.
Error of judgment occurs anytime we judge others rather than assess them. So to make an assessment with a judgment, it's a value. Like you're wrong and bad. With an assessment, you did this. This is the situation that happened. Matter of fact, when I teach people about finding peace, I have people be mindful of their self-talk. Mm-hmm. And an exercise I do with people, it's really cool when you start to see this. You describe whatever happened in whatever language you're going to use. This was terrible, awful. He was I can't stand it. Now describe the same situation with no adjectives. And so when you do that, you're just making an assessment. This person said something to that person, and that those comments were inappropriate, and this is what's going to happen next. So the error of judgment occurs when we judge rather than assess. When we assess, we're more prepared to meet people where they are.
I want to dovetail off of that. We're going to come back to the next 3, but I want to get my mind around this because I absolutely love it, love it, love it. You're working with self-love, with murderers, with rapists, with serial killers, and you're helping them to cultivate that inner flame, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. I absolutely am. And, there was a guy who I work with, he raped men, women, children, every cellmate he ever had. Now, when I even saw him, and I typically don't look at someone's jacket, what they did ahead of time, but since it was a new prison and it was the first time I'm in there, I was looking at some of the things that I'm getting ready to work with. When I read his jacket that night when I went home, I admit it so freely right now because I'm not sad in this moment, but that night when I went home, I literally cried in my car, like burst into tears. Like the stuff he did to people, so awful. Now here's cartoon world. Cartoon world is, I didn't think that somebody like that should ever get out of prison. Mm-hmm. And here's why I say it's cartoon world. Someone else might be going, I believe that too. Great. You and I are sharing a cartoon world thought because the real world is his prison sentence had an expiration date and he is getting out of prison. So now my choice was, you shouldn't have done this, you shouldn't have done that, and never really help him or genuinely try to help him and in the real world the way he is. I gave him my best. He actually threw himself fully into the program, worked with him in my groups for 6 months, and individually, I worked as hard as he did. 2 years after I left that prison, maybe 2.5 years after I left that prison, I was speaking in another prison in the state. Well, not only did he get out of the hole, which he was never, if he didn't pass that program, he never would have gotten out of the hole, period. He had been 2.5 years without incident. He was a mentor in this new prison. This is someone who made someone like me, who has more than 20,000 hours of clinical experience, cry in my car on the way home based off what he did. But then when you really learn his story and what happened to him, it was awful, from his father and uncles repeatedly raping him and things like that. So he didn't just wake up like that. You're right. I do this with people because I believe in all people. Back to our analogy with the hand and the fingers. Like you and I, it sounds like we share a very similar belief in that we're all connected, that we're all one. And that means even the people that do really awful things are also a part of us.
Yes. How did you help him? Because I'm thinking back to a dear friend of the gym from years ago, 80-something-year-old gentleman who had committed, geez, I don't even like that term. He had cheated on his wife like 2 decades earlier, and he still felt to the day in his almost mid-80s that he didn't deserve to be on this planet, that he was as far away from being able to love himself as he possibly could be, and that should not be allowed for what he did.
Yeah, and I would have worked, if I worked with him, I would want him to say, listen, you can't change the past. Like you've obviously learned from it. It obviously shaped you. Listen, there's a difference between guilt and shame. Guilt is feeling bad about what you've done.
Yeah.
Great. Learn from it. That's human. It's probably a pretty healthy thing for us to get along in society. I feel guilty. I hurt you. I want to learn from it and remedy it, change it. Shame is feeling bad about who you are. Mm-hmm. In my research, my entire career has demonstrated, and I specialize in people working with people convicted of violent crimes, has shown me overwhelmingly that when people live in shame, they act out of shame. So if he sat there, shamed himself for all those years, when a healthier, more effective strategy might have been, I was wrong, I'm sorry, I wish I could go back and change it, I can't, I'm going to learn from it, I'm going to be better from this moment forward, and then that's it. Look, the past is gone. It doesn't mean that pain, we can't talk about pain or talk about events, but the more we live in the past, well, look, the past is gone, so whether we're going to keep living it or not. The Buddha has a wonderful saying about if you take a raft across the river and your journey involves going across the river and climbing up a mountain, you need that raft to get across the river, but why are you going to carry it up the mountain? At some point, you got to just let the raft down.
Love it. So let's go to the last two here. Error of language.
So error of language is similar to error of approach in that you're shutting people down. The difference is error of approach occurs at the onset of the communication. Mm-hmm. Error of language occurs at any point during the conversation. It specifically is centered on extreme language. You always do this. You never do that. When someone says always or never, that means, listen to this. If somebody says, nobody listens to me, nobody cares about me, there are 7 billion people plus on this planet. For nobody to listen to you, well, that would be a tough spot to be in. The challenge is to be able to get rid of those extremes and become accurate in your language. When you're accurate and balanced in your self-talk, and the language that you give to the world changes everything. So that's the error of language.
And I think it brings us back to everything we've talked about today, and kindness and compassion and presence and mindfulness. Now I know everything, Christian, so I want you to tell me about the error of omnipotence.
I love it. I love it. I'll tell you what, I really enjoy this interaction with you. I love your energy. It's fantastic.
It goes both ways.
And I love your humor too. I love that stuff like that. So yeah, the error of omnipotence, if you haven't caught it yet, he was just demonstrating it. The error of omnipotence, all-powerful omnipotence, is the error that occurs when we believe we're responsible for what other people do. So I'm responsible to give you my best. What you do with that is on you. I don't fix people. I don't heal people. I'm with people, and I give them the best that I can give them. But when they heal, they are healing themselves. When they're fixing whatever they need to fix. It's not me fixing them. And here's why this is so powerful. We could take this with parenting, but you could take it with anything. But let's take it with parenting. When parents tend to see their children as an extension of themselves, now they put just unrealistic expectations on their children. Like, you're going to be living what I should have done. Hold on a second. You're responsible to give your children your best, but then they're their own individuals. And they're going to go through this world long after you're gone, and you want to give them your best. So error of omnipotence occurs when we believe we're responsible for what others do. We're not. We're only responsible for ourselves. That being said, I understand I impact you. So it's not saying, well, see, I don't have an influence on you because it's the error of it. No, I have an influence on you. I'm not responsible for your actions.
That also helps us to let go of attachment. How dare you do this if I'm not attached, if it's not me? Oh, okay, well, maybe we should talk about that, but I'm not holding on with the death grip. So what is the one? This has been phenomenal, Christian, and I know we can keep going on and on and on. And
Yeah.
first off, I'm going to send them to your website in a second. Then we'll do a meditation. But what is the one? I'm going to call it the. Wow, it's interesting. So a brief story with my wife and myself, which is when I'm doing a deep dive or something, or I've got a lot going on at once. For instance, I'm capable of reading a full book in a couple hours, but I can read a full book in a couple of hours. That's come from all these 1,000+ shows. But I can't really take in other input during that time. I'm very imbalanced, not unstable, imbalanced. But I used to say something like, "Not now, Pookie," if she would interrupt me. And she's like, "You're being an a-hole." Is what, why can't you? And now what I say is, hold on. I actually do it as a Tai Chi move. I'll bring my hands up. Hold on.
Nice.
What is the one single thing we can do for ourselves or others when we start to go into that fight or flight response where we're being driven from the emotional center of the brain and not that frontal lobe?
I kind of have a visual. I played baseball in college. I didn't know I was going to be this big, or I probably would have stuck with football. But I was an outfielder and a center fielder. And if a ball was hit directly at me, a line drive comes right at you and you're in center field, if you dart backwards, you might mess it up, or if you dart forward. So you're taught physically to kind of drop your energy. And you drop your leg, you actually kind of drop a little bit and then wait, and then you make your break. Well, I carried that analogy, that metaphor into my life. When I'm in a situation and there's chaos, there's a fight breaking out, there's something, my mindset is I get there, but I kind of like drop my energy. So I'm not ready to do this. Let me take a minute. And that's different than saying I'm counting to 10 or I'm counting to 10 and walk away. That's not real. That doesn't work for a lot of people. That's way worse. It's actively saying, wait, let me assess what's happening before I make a radical judgment with extreme words. So I'd say drop your energy.
On.
And I would say, look, I think one of the most powerful pieces of advice that I teach that I would love to share with your audience is this. Every emotional experience will have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Mm-hmm. So no matter what you ever feel, it's eventually going to pass. Emotions come and go, but actions cannot be undone. And it's wise to recognize this over and over. You know, it's one thing to know it. Oh, I think I read that somewhere, versus every emotion every day when you're experiencing something, you're going, wait a minute, there's a beginning, there's a middle, there'll be an end. I'm okay, I can handle this.
We really got to get to the meditation here, but I got to go with one more story. I can't believe I'm going to do it. $450 and a wallet.
That's a great story. Okay, so I ran a Center for People Convicted of, co-founded a Center for People Convicted of Violent Crimes. In the state of California, if you convict a violent crime, you're sentenced to 52 weeks of anger management. And so outpatient, you're out of prison, you're out of jail, you still got to come, you got to pay every week. So you can imagine people come into these groups pretty angry. So one day this guy came into this group and he was like really, really angry. And a lot of people don't realize that I'm Dr. Conte. So they'll be like, oh, like we're waiting for the teacher to get here or something like that. So the guy's in there and he didn't know I was in here. And he's like, man, I'm going to kill this dude. This dude robbed me. He's like, I'm going to kill him. I swear to God, I'm leaving this place right here. I'm going to go kill him. So somebody's like bumping him like, dude, that's Doc. And I'm like, so I said, listen, I'm going to start. I see you're fired up right now, my man. I said, I see you want to kill this dude. Let me ask you a question. How long were you down? He said, I just spent 8 years down. Mm-hmm. And I said, man, that's messed up. I said, let me ask you a question. Did you like your time when you were down? He's like, what you mean I like? He didn't want to talk. He didn't want to look at me. He's like, I'm not even. People were like, because I had a lot of respect from the guys in the group. They're like, man, answer him. He said, no, I didn't like my time when I was down. And I said to him, let me ask you this now. Was there ever a moment when you were sitting in prison and you were thinking to yourself, man, I'd like to be out of here. I'd like to leave here. He was like, man. And again, the guys are like, just answer him. He said, you ever been to prison? I said, no. He said, then you don't even know. And I said, I appreciate that, but I want to ask you, I'd just love for you to answer this. Was there ever a moment when you were incarcerated where you were thinking, I want to get out of here? He said, yes, every day. I said, okay, how badly did you want to get out? He said, I want to get out so badly. You have no idea. I said, would you have paid $450? Because that was the amount of money that he thought was robbed from him. He was like, oh, it was super like fast. And so that next week, the guy, he comes back. Remember, this is only his second time in the group. So he comes into the group, and that week, the week prior, we also talked about mindfulness, understanding that sometimes how hunger or sleep affects us. So the guy goes, he comes back in next week. He goes, "Can I say something at the beginning of the group?" I said, "My man, I'm dying to hear what you have to say. I'm so glad you're back with us because we thought you were going out to kill somebody." He said, "Listen," he said, "when I went home, I thought about what you said, like and he said, so I thought I'm going to sleep on it. And then I also thought I'm really tired, and you just talked about that. So he said, I'm just going to sleep on it." So he said, I slept on it. I woke up the next morning and I was in my bed, and I was so happy that I was in my bed and not in a prison cell from killing that guy. He said, I felt good about myself, so I started to clean up the room. And when I cleaned up my room, I pulled up these clothes and I found my wallet and the $450.
Woohoo!
I love it.
Love it, Christian. All right. Where can people to go to find out more and to find your brilliant book? And you're going to have fun with this. If you're reading this book, it is like Christian speaks. He's telling it from the heart, but there is story after monk wisdom, after cut off legs in a good way. Can you say cut off legs in a good way? But it's a really fun read, which will drive home a message. Where can people go to find your book and find out more?
So yeah, thank you. Definitely you can get this book. It'll be pretty much in your favorite bookstore, but it'll also be online. You can get on Amazon, SoundsTrue.com, BarnesandNoble.com, my website, drchristianconte.com. And I think too, also I have a YouTube channel as well. You kind of just type in Dr. Christian Conte and you'll get to my channel. I try to just do what you're doing. I try to share good messages with the world.
Awesome. And you have like a daily tidbits, daily something else as well.
I do. So I wake up every morning. My routine is I meditate, and then I imagine that I'm standing in front of the entire world. Yeah. And this is the way I use Twitter. I think, okay, if I was standing in front of the entire world, what could I say that would be conscious to the world? And I kind of just go with what comes to me in that moment. And then I set it down. I don't go scrolling through it. I set it down, move on with my day. But I've been in that routine because it sets my intention for the day. So my Twitter is at Dr. Dr. and then _ Conte, Conte. People were interested in that.
Come on over to inspirenationshow.com. We'll do everything in our power to get you over to Dr. Christian Conte. This has been phenomenal, Christian. Before we dive into a brief meditation, any last words of wisdom you want to share with people today?
I would say this. Whether you want to be or not, you are contributing content to the universe today. And at the end of every day, and at the beginning and end of every day, I think it's wise to ask ourselves, what do we intend to contribute to the universe? And at the end of the day, what did we actually, not what did we mean to do, but what did we actually contribute? So when you see anger, if you meet it with more anger, it's worth waking up to the realization that's tough at first, but it's worth learning that you're actually contributing to the anger of the world. And here's my analogy. If we're in a dark room and one person, it's crowded, and one person lights up a light, everybody looks to that light. But if people could complain about how dark it is, or they could light up their own light. And imagine if everyone lit up their own lights, it would significantly change things.
Woohoo!
I love that.
Awesome. Would you mind leading us in a short meditation, whatever you feel called? And if you're driving down the road, do this when you get the car parked or at home. All
right. So let's take wherever you are. If you have the spot to sit up, I would ask you to sit up. There's a good reason for that. When our back is straight, it activates that reticular formation. And this is a wonderful aspect of being able to meditate. In this instance, I'll share with you an imagery, a visual imagery, and I'd love for you to try to do your best to follow. So if you're comfortable enough and you're in a safe space, I would love for you to close your eyes. I want you to take some deep breaths. And I want you to imagine as clearly as possible. I want you to see yourself standing in front of whatever conflict kind of gets to you, whatever that conflict is. If it's a particular person, try to visualize that person as clearly as possible. If it's a whole situation, let's personify it and make it a person. As clearly as you can see that. And now imagine that you're encountering this conflict. I would imagine that maybe your heart starts to beat a little faster and you become mindful that your heart's beating a little faster. I would imagine that if you're encountering this kind of conflict, that maybe your thoughts start to go a little faster. Let's be mindful of those thoughts. And in this instance, in this moment, as you encounter this conflict, I want you to imagine that you're surrounded by divine energy. And this divine energy allows your spirit to enter the spirit of the person that you're so angry with or have so much conflict with. And now as you inhabit their body, as you see things through their eyes, you start to see yourself, how they see you. You start to see the feelings that are coming out of you. And you also start to feel that the people or the person who's causing you conflict has gone through so much more than you ever realized. And now you start to feel a sense of understanding. And that understanding moves through you. And because it's enlightenment, it moves through you so quickly and so powerfully that you feel a sense of relief, a sense of peace. You recognize that that other person is a part of you, that you're all connected in the same divine energy. And in that moment of realization, you come back to your body. You feel your body, except this time, your body is exuding light. And it feels incredibly empowering because you have tapped in to the divine. And you feel that image. As soon as you feel comfortable, start to open your eyes.
Awesome. 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 Love it. Love you. Love the work you're doing, Christian.
Thank you so much for doing this. Absolutely. I love this connection, man. I appreciate you so much. I love your energy. You're literally painting peace with the work you're doing. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you. It goes both ways. We are both doing the work. And if anybody is listening to this and takes even one fractional step forward, they're doing the work of bringing peace to the world as well, because it all starts in here. It all.
Yes. 100%.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I got to crank it back up from the finish. That was such a beautiful meditation. I'm like, So for everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun, get walking through anger, and begin leaning into your anger today and shine bright. Woohoo!
Love it. I love it.
Thank you so much, my brother.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
This was awesome. It so goes both ways. I love talking with you. I am so glad we set this up for today. What is more powerful than bringing light to the darkness?
I don't think anything.
That's what you're doing, man.
You're doing it too.
So.
All right, buddy. Let's talk soon.
All right. Be well. I just had the most amazing interview with Dr. Christian Conte on Walking Through Anger. To check out more incredible videos on working with your anger, click here, subscribe below. And that's a wrap.